Assalamu alaikum. It's Khaliah here, real estate investor coach in Washington, D.C. And I wanted to take the time to go live today so that I could answer one of the questions of the week. And the question was, how do you go about starting a virtual wholesaling business? What are the pros and cons? And is there a bigger financial risk? And so what I'll do is I'll take a moment just to let some others hop on, and then I'll go ahead and answer the questions. Okay. I see some others are on. Hi, how are you? Salaam alaikum. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. Hi, Justin. Okay, so let's get started. We're discussing virtual wholesaling, the pros and cons, and the financial risk. And I want to start by just giving a disclaimer that I've never actually started a virtual wholesaling business. I've attempted to branch out into other markets in the past. I do have a brokerage in Washington, D.C., and also we are licensed in Florida. So I've attempted to kind of start something in Miami. Never put too much effort into it because the market where I am is pretty active. So that's why I never really expanded so much. But the question was about virtual wholesaling. And what I want to start with is basically how to start up a local wholesaling business. Because when I got started in real estate, virtual wholesaling wasn't really a big hype. Most people who taught real estate investing taught you to actually start in your local market. So I wanted to start with that and then kind of branch into the virtual side of it. So of course, if you're starting a wholesaling business, you're going to first start by finding motivated sellers. So once you find those motivated sellers, you call those sellers, you ask them if they want to sell their house. Then of course, in your local market, you would actually go meet with those sellers to take a look at the house, take pictures, do an inspection, and of course build a rapport with them and get them under contract. After they agree to sell you the house and you enter into your contract, then you would go out and you could do some online marketing or some local marketing, but basically you would market to people who are looking to rehab houses. And so once you found that person, you would lock them into a contract and you would reassign your contract to them, and then you would go to settlement to close out your deal. So that's pretty much the way that it will work by doing a local wholesaling business. Okay, I see Justin said he needs to do more deals. Justin, are you working a local or a virtual wholesaling business? Okay, so while he answers my question, I'm going to go on to the virtual side. So the way that this will look different is, let's first start with finding your leads. Typically, even within your own market, you can actually buy leads or you can go to the courthouse. So that part, you're not actually physically leaving your physical location unless you're actually going to the courthouse. Then you would be leaving your physical location. You would have to have somebody else. If you were doing something virtually, you would have to have someone else who's going to the courthouse to get those leads for you. But if you're buying your leads or you're getting the leads, let's say online on Craigslist or what have you, then you wouldn't necessarily need somebody to go physically and get any leads for you. So that's the first thing with the virtual side. The second thing is calling the sellers. Of course, if you're calling, I've even had people overseas make calls. So that's not something necessarily where you would have to go somewhere physically to meet someone. The main difference, I think, with the virtual wholesaling is actually meeting with the sellers. And I can tell you, even with doing the local side of it, with the wholesaling and the agent side of it, I've had people go to the courthouse. I've had people make the calls for me. But one part of the business that I've never actually delegated was actually meeting with the sellers. And so the reason why is because meeting with the sellers is very important, especially because sometimes, let's say I've even met with a seller and we've done a contract in the car, or we may have went to McDonald's to do the contract. So really, in order to actually get the seller into a contract, it does require some type of sales skills. And so really, when you're doing all this on the local side of it, you're actually doing most of this yourself when you're first starting out. But if you're doing it on the virtual side of it, then what you're going to do is you're going to have to outsource meeting with the seller, because there's no way for you to physically meet with the seller if you're not in that locale. So you got to make sure that if you're actually going to outsource that person is actually capable of closing a deal. Because if you outsource it to somebody, like most of this is administrative as far as finding sellers and doing research, and even the calls, you really want to make sure that the person has some type of sales skills or telemarketing skills. But primarily when you're meeting with the seller, you want the person to have sales skills, because you may have all these leads and you're having them call people, but if they can't get an appointment and you're working with somebody virtually, then it's going to be very difficult for you to actually be able to close deals. But I would say that that's the key, or that's the only difference. Is of course, like once you, let's say you send somebody in another market and they go actually get the seller under contract, then once they give you the contract, or you can send them the contract through email. Once you go through that portion, then pretty much you can advertise your deal online to be able to bring in a buyer and reassign your contract. So that part pretty much looks the same. I would say the main difference, like I mentioned before, is just being able to meet with the seller. And let's see what Justin said. Justin said he's struggling, okay, with old abandoned houses. Okay. And so I guess just to get back to the local part, because Justin said he's working locally, where are your struggles? Are your struggles actually calling the seller or getting the appointment with the seller? What are you doing after you're getting the abandoned houses? I guess you're reaching out to the sellers. Are you having a hard time reaching them? Or you're just having a hard time converting them to an appointment? Or are you having problems on your appointment? Which one of the three would you say? Okay, so while he answers that, I'm going to go back to the questions here. So one of the things that I want to touch on is the financial piece, because she asked, is it a bigger financial risk? I would say most of this pretty much looks the same. It just depends on whether or not you're actually buying your leads, or if you're sending somebody to the courthouse to get the leads. Because of course, if you're sending somebody, you'll have to work something out with them where you're going to compensate them financially. Maybe they JV in the deal with you. You do it that way, or you pay them per lead. Most people who are going to go get the leads from the courthouse, they want to get paid per lead. So I would say that that's a financial cost, whether it's local or virtual. But the biggest difference I want to say is that if you're working virtually, and let's say you're actually JVing with another wholesaler, let's say you have somebody else going on the appointment and maybe they're taking it over from there. Then if you're going to JV with somebody that's in another location, then you'll have to be able to split the fee with them. So that's kind of where the financial difference comes in. Whereas if you're working in your local market and you're the one that's going on the appointment, you're the one that's getting it under contract, and you're the one that's actually reassigning the contract to the buyer, then you keep your entire wholesale fee. But if you're actually partnering with other people, then of course they're going to expect to get compensated. So that's where the financial difference will come into play. And as far as the pros and the cons, one thing I want to mention about that is that the pros could be, if you're working virtually, the biggest pro to me would be that you're working in a market with more activity, or maybe it's easier to find deals there and to reassign deals. So maybe the market is less competitive, or there's more activity. So to me, that's what I would consider some of the pros. I think the biggest con would be is that most people get into wholesaling because they eventually want to move on to bigger and better things. So most people start off in wholesaling because, let's say, eventually they want to get into flipping. They don't have the money to flip real estate, so they start off on the wholesaling side so that they can kind of get experience, get their feet wet, meet with sellers, analyze deals, like being able to look at the properties, analyze the construction, build rapport, sign contracts. So basically, you're getting your feet wet to get into the rehabbing side. And most investors that I know, I got started in 2003, most of the investors that I know personally, they started off as wholesalers. But they actually started off in their local markets, and so now they're still working in their local markets, actually doing flipping and new construction and things like that. So, but what I want to say is that the biggest con would be that if you're working in another market, it will be a harder transition to get into the flipping side of it, because with flipping, like if you're actually rehabbing properties, you want to be managing your contractors. And so if you're working in another market and you want to get into the flipping side of it, there would be, unless you go down there or wherever it is, it would be more difficult for you to be able to manage people on your projects. And then if you decide to, okay, well now I've done this virtually, I want to establish it in my own market, well, technically you'll really be starting over, because you'll have to build up your list of motivated sellers again. You'll have to build up your list of buyers again. You'll have to build up your resources as far as like real estate agents and title companies. So technically it's like if you decide to take your business from one location to another location, pretty much you're starting over, because real estate is a very localized business. So of course it can be great. Let's say if you're working virtually in another market, you know, you're making your money, but just keep in mind that once you get into the flipping side of it, pretty much it'll be like you're starting your business over if you decide to work in your local area. And then also you'll have to build up your contacts again and everything. So there you have it. Keita asked me to ask this question. I hope I was able to answer it for her. And if you have any questions about it, I hope that you can just leave them in the comments, and I'll be sure to come back and answer them. Okay, I see Justin here. He just got back to me. He said that there's too much tax delinquency. Okay. Have you, Justin, I guess, have you maybe try reaching out or looking at some different types of leads? So maybe if you're not going after vacant properties and tax delinquencies, maybe you could try to go after a different type of lead and see if you have success with those. Maybe it could be like code violations. Some people go after quitclaim deeds. So maybe you could try to narrow it down and see if you can try to find some different types of leads if you're not having success with the vacants. And then I'm sure, would you say that every property has like too much tax delinquencies? Because if you're looking at, let's say, all these properties where you live and they all have tax delinquencies, and the tax amount is too high, if it's worth more than what the property is worth, then you may want to switch over to another type of lead. And with the tax delinquencies too, are you trying to go after the properties in the auction, or are you going after the properties directly to the owner? Because that's another thing, is that it's always good to try to speak directly with the owners. I think he's listening. Okay, I'm not sure. I think he jumped off. Okay, so again, if you have any questions, please just leave them below in the comments, and I'll be sure to come back and answer any questions that you have. And take care. Enjoy the rest of your Saturday. Assalamu alaikum, and bye for now.